You're really going to teach me? You make it sound as if you never expected me to hold up my end of our bargain. Kawaki, of course, wasn't satisfied with the summary of Elder Potley's operation, so Soraka's entourage split up to pursue their respective tasks. Devi went to the docks with a handful of guards to start trading her goods, while Soraka and Mitra went to a more quiet part of Shawk's holdings with the young Osalo female. They entered a glade created by a dead tree that had been felled by the locals. Roughly half of the tree had already been taken away to be used for one thing or another. The patch of sunlight in the otherwise shadowed understory was filled with opportunistic plants taking advantage of the gap in the canopy. A meter or two beyond the edges of the clearing, 24 of Soraka's house guard kept a watchful eye on the surroundings. I didn't know what to think, Shawk replied. Rolengork is a land bound by strict laws and customs, is it not? It is, Shawk admitted, but those are big laws. Agreements between clans, punishment for major crimes and breaking taboos. Soraka didn't look at her as he paced the perimeter of the clearing. Meaning that minor problems are simply ignored. I know that chieftains handle that sort of thing out in the jungle, Shawk replied, but it's not like that in the city. There are the big clans that come here to do big clan things, and then there's the rest of us. Who lives in those clan-hold-looking complexes on top of the largest hills around the city. Those are where members of the warrior clans stay when they come to visit. But what about law enforcement and the general maintenance of order? Who runs the city, so to speak? The big warrior clans make sure that the big rules are followed, Shawk told him, plus anything that happens right in front of their faces, I guess. Everything else just sorts itself out. I don't know why you insist on being so dense, gee. I told you about this when we got here, right? He stopped pacing and turned to look at Mitra. His wife was preoccupied with watching the cloud of colorful butterflies that gathered over the flowering plants in the glade. You did, but this is the first time we've really seen it in depth. The other cities are primarily composed of the presiding clan's members. Soraka turned his attention to Shawk, stepping several meters into the clearing. Well, enough about that for now, he said. I already have a good idea about your martial background, but let's see how you do against a properly trained warrior. The young Osalo looked around at the members of Soraka's house guard. Not them, Soraka said. Me. You? You wanted to learn how to fight bigger opponents, yes? I'm the biggest one around. Soraka lowered himself into a neutral stance, gesturing for Shawk to approach. She hesitated for several moments. Soraka was nearly a meter taller than Shawk, and likely 3 times the weight. He waited patiently, and she eventually gained the courage to pad forward. Her light steps transformed into a sudden burst of speed. She came in low, aiming a swipe at his thigh. Soraka shifted back a half step. Rather than attempting to extend her measure, she immediately disengaged. Very good, Soraka nodded in approval. You avoided a mistake that I expect many of those pit fighters would have made. I did? I didn't feel safe, so I just pulled out. A warrior's intuition is usually superior to their active thoughts. But that intuition only goes so far as it is trained. It is only when one learns to harness intuition, exercise discipline, and seamlessly apply thought that one can be considered a true warrior. One who purely relies on intuition is merely an animal. One who thinks too much is meat. Where am I on that scale? You are wherever you are, Soraka replied. It's not a fixed thing. Influences both internal and external always affect the balance, and the best balance always adjusts to the situation. Now, attack again. Shawk didn't hesitate when he beckoned. She circled him warily before darting in to strike at his flank. Soraka shifted to face her. His right paw came down to intercept her head and she blurred to the side. Shawk's evasion brought her straight into his left paw. She flew 2 meters and went rolling through the flowers, sending petals and puffs of pollen into the streams of afternoon light. The young Osalo wobbled unsteadily to her feet, shaking her head several times. How did you know what to do? She slurred. You are not a reckless attacker, he said. When you switch to offense, you've already determined an avenue to safety should things go awry. In that particular exchange, evasion would have only brought you to safety if used in 2 directions. One of them is generally unthinkable to those on the offense, so I prepared a counter for the remaining option. What was the unthinkable option? Backwards. Shawk's jaw fell open slightly. Soraka grinned. Embracing your nature has brought you far, he said, but that nature can also be exploited. I won't be able to touch you at this rate, Shulk said. What would you do in my place? Throw something. The Osalo picked up a rock and threw it. He deflected it to the side. Shulk leveled a flat stare at him. It didn't work. Not against me, but it might have against a warrior more on your level. The fundamental issue you face is one of mass and measure. As you are, if you successfully strike, say, Rolo the Red, you will draw blood. If she gets her claws in you, you're pretty much done. Her superior reach makes it that much easier, and you have to work 10 times harder than her to come out on top. I know that already, Shulk told him, but I haven't figured out how to beat it. You'll be afforded some leeway as you get stronger, Soraka said. The gap between small and large combatants shrinks the more powerful they get. To cover what remains, most focus on improving their measure or enhancing their defenses to the degree that they can efficiently trade blows. Smaller races like goblins and dwarves are excellent subjects to observe on that front. What's a dwarf? A dwarf is basically a shorter, stockier human. They're usually tougher. I've never seen a human before. Humans are like monkeys without tails. Anyway, warriors of those races either use projectiles or long weapons to compensate for their lack of reach. That reach can grow to 2 or 3 meters, which puts beastmen using their natural weapons at a disadvantage. You don't have to be a goblin, dwarf or human to employ that concept, however. Soraka strolled over to the fallen tree in the middle of the glade, stopping about 3 meters away. He extended an arm towards the dried trunk, waving his claws around. I can't reach this, right? Right. He took another swing. 4-meter-long furrows appeared in the dead wood. Shulk's eyes widened and she pointed a claw excitedly. That. Teach me how to do that. Soraka grinned at her reaction. I'm not sure if you'll be able to learn the basics of it by the time we need to leave, but we'll give it a shot. Beastmen tend to rely on their natural weaponry, so martial arts were developed to emulate the way that other races use equipment to extend their measure. It is known by many names, but the name of a martial art is unimportant. It's essentially a boost art that increases the range of one's natural weaponry. That also means it is only as strong as your natural weaponry, but at least you can quickly restore it if it breaks. Does it work on teeth? Shulk asked. An Osalo's strongest attack is their bite. He furrowed his brow and applied the martial art to his teeth. Chuckles rose from around the glade as he tried to talk. Oh Faye, hi hitch hairy horvad. Ahem. That was very awkward. I can see a potential application if you want greater penetration after you bite your target, but I wouldn't advise it. Warriors from the Beastman Confederacy only bite in single combat where they are certain no one else will interfere. It narrows one's field of vision, locks them into place and exposes them to attacks from other sources on the battlefield. Soraka flicked his claws in quick succession, gouging 4 holes in the trunk a dozen meters away. Shulk stared at the result, then back at Soraka with hungry eyes. You can also release them like that, he said. What you will be learning is a basic form of the martial art. What you just saw is something you can eventually develop. Fair enough, Shulk said. What do I have to do? You've already grasped at least one martial art, which is the evasion that you used against Rolo the Red earlier today and against me just now. That means you have the minimum capacity to employ simple martial arts. What's left is to tie them to your combat style so you can grasp them. I don't know if I have anything like a combat style. I just do what makes sense. You do, he nodded. You wouldn't be able to perform martial arts otherwise. Some styles come more easily than others, depending on one's race and how distant it is from your natural form. In your case, I suspect you are doing what is natural to the Osalo race, which will make it indispensable for you and your people in the future. My people? Soraka went over to lean against the dead tree. You expressed discontent with the, let's just call it the primal way in which the city functions. Despite it being a city, it is far from civil aside from the fact that people aren't wantonly slaughtering one another for food. Not that this isn't an achievement in itself, many societies don't even get that far. I don't like how things are right now, Shulk said, but, at the same time, it's just the way things are, isn't it? Besides, to even try changing anything, I'd have to be a lord. But you are a lord, Soraka told her. Well, you are on your way to becoming one, at least. The Ocello girl stared at him. Soraka crossed his arms. You don't believe me? Of course not. How am I a lord? I don't even have a tribe or clan. The entire Ocello population in this part of the city is your clan, is it not? I might have called them that 100 years ago, but not today. He sighed and scratched his head, walking over to where the Ocello youth was examining the gouges in the fallen tree. What comes first, he asked, a tribe or its leader? Do people magically manifest the moment a lord springs into existence? No, Shulk answered, but I'm not big and powerful like any lord. That's why I said you're on your way to becoming one, Soraka told her. You may not yet be a lord, but you are demonstrating the behaviors of one. One becomes what they are, so to speak. Furthermore, your people are already reciprocating your leadership. But I'm not doing anything special, Shulk said. Anyone can do what I'm doing. People can do a lot of things. But the fact of the matter is that they don't. For instance, why are you risking yourself in the fighting pits? There is far easier work. Because I can make more fighting than anything else that I might be able to get work for. And what do your earnings go toward? Do you spend it on yourself? No. If what Elder Potley says is true, you've been putting toward improving your community. Is that something Rollo the Red would do? No, but most people would think that way. It's just the decent thing to do. Really now, Jirika, what do you think? I think that she's a sucker. A convenient one. Shulk flattened her ears and glared at the Inquisitor. Soraka chuckled. For the record, he said, I think that you're doing the right thing. But I'm a lord, as you've probably noticed. The same type of lord as you seem to be growing into. Lords do what they believe is best. We'd even act on behalf of others for no reason other than a sense of responsibility. We're convenient suckers, as Jirika so elegantly put it. Most of what we do, others would only do for the sake of those closest to them and possibly not even then. At the same time, what a lord believes may not necessarily be a beneficial thing. One may be an evil tyrant that uses their power and authority to visit all manner of ills upon those they are responsible for. Or they can be so foolishly good that they bring ruin instead of prosperity. It's never just one thing or the other, however. All lords are a mix of things, and are influenced by their race, experiences and circumstances. This is part of the reason why I'm going out of my way to instruct you. I just wanted you to teach me how to fight bigger opponents. And I will, Soraka nodded. Because you will have to, in the future. And not in the fighting pits. Look, I'm not trying to become the leader of some warband here. But a war may just be what your people will have on your hands, Soraka told her. I will explain, if you would only listen. The idea that her clan might be attacked seemed to get through to Shulk. She settled on her haunches and waited for Soraka expectantly. The tale of civilization is not one of slow and steady progress. He sat down on the log beside her. It advances in fits and starts, leaping ahead through periods of great progress and turmoil. It can stagnate indefinitely and even fall to decay. And you, young Shulk, are about to take one of those leaps of progress. Me? Shulk's confusion was evident. Do you mean Rolengork? With Ranadratha's conquest of the Draconic Kingdom? No, Soraka shook his head. Ranadratha's expansion into the Draconic Kingdom is not guaranteed to bring progress. Exposure to new ideas and seeing new horizons may lead to change, but, right now, he is simply facilitating a massive tribal migration. Then what are we doing that's so special? How should I put it? In essence, you are freeing up time. You lost me. We beastmen have our challenges, Soraka told her. We have a nature that makes it difficult to see anything other than what is right in front of us. The vast majority of our time revolves around the hunt, securing our next meal. Even in the city here, that doesn't change. One simply goes from hunting to toiling so you can afford the most basic of necessities. Davy's ongoing trade showed that discretionary spending was minimal in Rolengork. People literally did as he said. They worked to simply survive, and they worked all day to do so. When they didn't work, they conserved their energy for the next day's work. It was not very different from life as a feral predator. I don't see how that will change, Shulk said. It will, Soraka replied. It already has, in fact. Between everything you're doing here, the cost of ranching Nug is much cheaper than the standard jungle herding practices in Rolengork. You are optimizing the use of your available territory, turning it orders of magnitude more productive than before. Really? Really? The arboreal nature of the Osalo has also made you skip a step in the usual process. Most societies go from whatever their primal roots are to hunter-gatherers. Then they pick up some form of pastoralism, which begins the shift to agrarianism and sedentary life when some people can afford to experiment with it. Farming facilitates even greater land utilization, but you're farming in 3 dimensions here. Doing so is a huge leap ahead that not many civilizations have grasped yet. Shork turned to look at Mitra. Do you all talk like this? I can't understand half of what he's saying. No, Mitra said, that's just him. What he means to say is that what you're doing is going to give you a lot of food, so you're probably going to need to defend your holdings from people who still only think in terms of raiding. Or worse. What could be worse than getting raided? People resist change. Especially those who believe that they stand to lose from it. All of those people ranching out in the jungle will feel threatened by your new techniques, as will the clans that they pay tribute to. The Osalo visibly struggled with the idea that others might do that. As young as she was, a bit of naivete might be expected, but the world wouldn't be so kind as to accommodate it. If one wished for peace, one needed to prepare for war. In the case of a lord, it was not only warfare of the martial sort. But it's not as if we're keeping our techniques to ourselves, Shork said. Anyone that comes to learn can learn. Little gardens like ours are popping up all over the city. Everyone benefits from this, right? The world would be a very different place if it was so reasonable, Mitra replied. We're not saying that everyone will react the same way, but it will happen in some form eventually. It's as Soraka said, right? What a lord believes may not necessarily be a beneficial thing. In this case, it extends to everyone. They will act to preserve the status quo because maintaining the status quo means maintaining their livelihoods. Those actions may mean your destruction. If you wish to protect what you are creating here, then you must be prepared to fight for it. We can't fight, Shork said, not a warrior clan. I know I said we were a warrior clan once, but that's not the same as being an active warrior clan today. They'll tear us apart like we're nothing. That may be the case right now, Soraka said, but possibly not in the future. From what I can tell, you are shrewd enough to know how to avoid unnecessary risks. If you apply that shrewdness to your leadership, you will find that you can achieve much without drawing the wrong sort of attention, possibly enough to deter even the warrior clans. Shork's lack of disbelief over the idea of the warrior clans quashing her people's work was a clear indicator of the type of suppression that Kawabaki suggested on their arrival. Living under the ruling elite was often like that, nails that stuck out got hammered. Without official recognition as a clan by Rolengork's presiding council, political avenues to preserve their fledgling industry were likely closed. The most expedient course for Shork and her people was to simply become a de facto power that couldn't be brushed aside, and Soraka believed that they could do it. So, Soraka asked, now that I've laid things out for you, what is your decision? Will you back down from your course? Remain as prey? Or will you fight to secure your holdings? This got way more serious than I expected it to. Shork scratched her ear. I have one question, though. What is it? Why are you doing this? You're not even from our country. What do you get from helping me? Soraka raised a paw to slowly stroke his jowls, looking straight into Shork's somber eyes. To plant a seed, perhaps. There are many things that I know I shouldn't do, but there are also things that I know I must do. The people of Rolengork suffered a devastating calamity 2 centuries ago, and they effectively lost everything that they were. What has risen out of the ashes, I suppose heartbreaking would be the closest feeling that can describe it. Seeing what I have seen, I can already imagine what was once here. That means I also have an idea of how far your society has devolved. You mean to say that you pity us? If it was merely pity, then I would simply do nothing but pity you and your people. What spurred me to act was not the past, but the present. It was you. Me? Don't let it get to your head, Soraka said, but I believe you'll be instrumental to the development of Rolengork as a civilization. If I left you to your fate, however, you would be facing a dark future indeed. Instead, I would rather see you as an agent for positive change. It is an opportunity that may not come again for centuries. So you're not after my body? No. Well, I wouldn't mind if I had a strong. Mitra grabbed Shork by the scruff of the neck and casually tossed her out of the glade. Rejected. Mitra. The harem has spoken, Mitra replied in an officious tone. What I meant was that you didn't have to throw her. Gotta lay down the law. You're just too soft when it comes to females, G. Soraka shook his head as they waited for the Ozalo girl to come back. So, Shulk brushed off her coat, you're teaching me how to fight because you want me to be able to defend my clan. I don't have decades to teach you, so I can only really point you in the right direction. But I'm sure even that is enough to overcome opponents like Rolo the Red. From what I've seen, the average member of the warrior clan's keeping order in the city is about as powerful as she is, so that means you'd be able to handle any official goons that come your way. Not that drawing attention to yourself like that is a good idea right now. But I can't defend everything on my own, Shulk told him. If a group of guards comes after me, I'm done for. You won't be on your own, Soraka replied. You have your clan. My clan is busy. They have to eat and all that. I told you before, what you are doing here is, in essence, freeing up time. In terms of natural behavior, when a period of plenty comes upon a tribe, they will tend to multiply. Then the population shrinks when that period of plenty ends, splitting off into migrations or being lost in tribal warfare. In an urban economy, however, having a bunch of cubs is not the only answer to excess resources. You can exchange your excess resources for goods and services, effectively buying time to focus on your pursuits. So I'll have a bunch of people with free time to help guard our stuff. That's not quite what I was getting at. There is something to be said about having a lot of people around, but that won't help you if a warband comes along. You need warriors to fight warriors. But I don't have any warriors. I can't just randomly pick up people and say you are a warrior, now. I can't pay them, either. It's good that you at least recognize the issues, Soraka said. This is probably the biggest obstacle you have right now. Your clan has decentralized entirely, become a non-entity, if you will. Fortunately, it seems that you still have a loose sense of shared identity, plus you have some followers due to what you've done so far. Additionally, you're the only investor in Elder Potley's agricultural venture, which should entitle you to a portion of his profits. How Shulk had already laid the groundwork for everything was a fascinating study in itself. Without any formal education or foreknowledge of what was happening, she had unintentionally acted to secure the economic and political backing required to rebuild her clan. But he doesn't profit off of it, Shulk told him. The sales of nug fodder go to help families in need. Charity is all well and good, Soraka said. But aimless charity does nothing to alleviate the fundamental issues facing your people, nor will it prepare you for the future. Thankful civilians will not protect the fungus farm from raids or worse. Well, they can try, but I'm sure you know that it won't be pretty and it will ultimately be ineffective. I don't know how Elder Potley will feel if I start demanding stuff. The instinct to nurture and protect is something you have to tame and harness, Soraka said. It's especially strong in benevolent lords. Right now, the abstract notion that you're helping your people is overriding what needs to be done. You have limited time and resources to rebuild and properly organize your clan. And what do I have to do to properly organize my clan? Well, the specific details are better left to you, but, broadly speaking, you need to train and rebuild the warrior caste and sort out the other castes according to the new realities brought about by your evolutionary industry. It will be a very delicate balancing act where you need to grow your power, forge alliances and avoid the wrong sort of attention. The way you put it is a bit exciting. I sort of wish I could stick around and chronicle this. We can always check in from time to time now that we've covered this ground. I think I get what you're trying to say, Shulk rubbed her neck, but I don't know if I can do all of that. It's a challenge, to be sure, Soraka nodded. I'm sure you'll eventually figure it out. You'll make mistakes and there will be a lot of uncertainty, but that's life. And don't try to go it alone, Mitra said. I don't know if Asalo are solitary hunter types, but you should learn how to rely on the people you trust. Make sure they're trustworthy first. Shulk let out a long sigh. Why does it feel like the weight of the world is suddenly on my shoulders? She asked. I never asked for any of this. I just wanted to help out a bit. That's often how it works, Soraka replied. History's great figures usually never ask for everything that happens to them. You'll really do it? Of course, Elder Potley chuffed in good humor. Karavaki and I have discussed many of the opportunities that our efforts here might lead to. To seize them efficiently, however, leadership is required. Besides, I think it will be good for our people. Despite being surrounded by so many others, so many Osalo live lost and alone in this all-engulfing city. Building a strong community will drive away that insidious malaise. Soraka exchanged looks with Kawabaki. As he expected, the uplifter had done much on her end, as well. With the elder's endorsement, Shulk would be off to an unassuming, but solid, start. With the evening well underway, they returned to the Kuroko's cliffs for dinner and to share their thoughts on what they had seen. "Are you sure we didn't do too much?" Mitara asked. "I know why you did it, but she might end up as Samrat in a few decades. Maybe sooner. That sort of thing can happen in a flash with the right timing and a bit of luck." "If she becomes a more mature version of her current self," Soraka answered, "I would count that a good thing. Even if they don't become our allies, the world needs bastions of order to stand against all of the chaos that assails it, and vestiges of order should chaos prevail and bring ruin to everything. Quite frankly, if something like the demon gods happened once again, Rolengork would surely be destroyed." He could only pray that someone survived to pick up the pieces. "What did you tell that mystic, anyway?" Soraka asked. "I swear his coat was 3 times glossier than when we left him." "Nothing overly special," Kawabaki said. "I used already working concepts present in Rolengork. That farm of theirs will generate revenues for a government budget. That budget will be divided between raising new mystics, training warriors, promoting vocations that support their agricultural industry, and funding research and development. They may not have anything like guilds here, but even in primitive tribes, the young learn from the old. It's only a matter of time before their truly sedentary state will organize the population into more advanced societal constructs." That much was undeniable. All social races did it to some degree, though the flow of things wasn't always the same. "Did you note anything problematic while speaking with Elder Potley?" "There's nothing that stuck out to me, actually. When you hear the name Daubik, what's the first thing that comes to mind?" "It's a human surname, isn't it? A ranger lineage from the Ulan diaspora." "That's what I thought." "Why?" "It's the name of the local god of the hunt." Jiraka let out a snort from where he was leaning against the entry flap. "So these guys hunt humans, but their god of the hunt is a human." "It may just be a coincidence," Kawabaki admitted, "but it's certainly not a Felid Beastman name, linguistically speaking." "What are the names of these other gods?" Soraka asked. The furrow creasing Soraka's brow deepened as Kawabaki went through a short list of names. Iskar is not common, but neither is it unheard of amongst beastmen. Mostly from the civilizations in the west on the way here. The rest are from other races. There's even an insectoid one in the mix. Another strange puzzle. "You said that the iconography of these gods is either nature-related or fashioned in the form of beastmen, right?" "I did," Kawabaki said. "The names and gods are probably inherited from a time when they were more interconnected with the world, but they've long forgotten the source." "What about you, Mitra? Did you pick up any linguistic clues this entire time?" "Their speech is bastardized between 7 different racial forms," the Sharon replied. "There's plenty of contamination from the Great Loot, as well. It's impossible to tell whether any single element is from some far-flung past. I suppose we'll have to stay sharp for that sort of thing from now on." Davy appeared partway through their discussion. She tossed sacks heavy with gems and precious stones onto the room's central table. "You didn't trade for more goods?" Soraka asked. "There's supposed to be an upper-class market in some other part of the city," the magnate replied. "I went with this for now since they might have some interesting offerings there. Can we visit tomorrow?" "Sure. Maybe we'll finally get to see what Rolengork's conquest of the Draconic Kingdom brings." Early the next morning, Soraka found Shulk swatting the air in front of a wooden post with a look of intense concentration. "Did anything come out?" he asked. Shulk leapt in fright, landing on a ledge 10 meters above him. "Something almost came out." She snarled down at him. "Who just sneaks up on others like that? You're going to lose an eye one of these days." "You were just concentrating to the exclusion of all else," Soraka said. "That's not a good habit, by the way." "I was just trying to follow what you said." Shulk hopped back down. "But it just doesn't make sense." "Yes, that's one of the challenges of martial arts. You've adopted a combat style that is derived from your racial aptitudes. Osalo are powerful and agile for their size, and evasion comes naturally to you because it's an extension of your nature as an Osalo warrior. With that in mind, you'd probably learn much faster while hunting. Folklore has it that the type of technique you're trying to learn originated from hunters who just needed a little bit more reach to catch their prey. That being said, whoever first developed that martial art and so many others that defied reality had to be insane. Fortunately, that insanity worked in their favor. The young Osalo warrior looked up at the canopy, sheathing and unsheathing her claws. Is it really that simple? Basic martial arts are simply that, basic. Does using evasion involve any great effort? No. It's the same way with all of them. Basic martial arts are effortless for veteran warriors. Your physical stamina will likely run out faster than your mental focus. All you have to do is make that initial connection. Soraka's wives walked down the cliff and joined them in front of the river. They were all armed for a day of shopping. Even the house guard had been wrangled into it. Wicker baskets were slung over their shoulders and he was certain that their magical containers had been emptied out. "Do we know which way we're going?" he asked. "It's some place called the Hibiscus Glade," Davy answered. "Do you know where that is, Shawk?" "I do, but are you sure you want to go there? It's very, stuffy." "Well, I guess you'll all fit in. Not that I'm saying you're stuffy or anything." Their guide leapt across the river and led them through the hills to the north. The divide between the wealthy and the impoverished was made abundantly clear long before they reached their destination. The cramped landscape of humble abodes in the understory gave way to wide jungle paths lined by spacious estates under the broad boughs of older trees. Each estate had a cluster of buildings much like the fortress courtyard in Kira. While both the poor and wealthy used timber construction, the homes of the rich had a sense of age to them. It was probably because the wood often sported painted designs displaying each clan's history and was treated with glossy lacquer to preserve its condition. No one race comprised the majority of the residents, though the instinctual quirks that Shawk had pointed out the previous day resulted in the same behaviors that they had observed in other parts of the city. Still, the citizens maintained a sense of pride that was absent elsewhere. "Stuffy indeed," Jiraiya grumbled. "You think there's anything behind those airs they're putting up?" "They're rich and influential," Shawk told him. "How did they come by their wealth?" Davy asked. "I don't know what each of them does, exactly, but most of them get it from their territories outside the city." "None of them are from the warrior caste, right?" "Right. These people are from the regular clans that live in the interior. They focus on ranching, collecting stuff and selling things." "Which is still important," Soraka said. "Are there any behaviors we should be wary of?" "Don't pick a fight, basically. They usually keep to themselves. I don't know what you're going to do if someone comes and asks who you are, though. You're a lord, but you're not one of our lords, so someone might get too curious." "Are they hostile to outsiders?" "We don't have outsiders, period. I have no idea how they'll see you." "Well, how do you see us?" Annoying, at first. Now you're just a mysterious lord." "Tall, striped and handsome?" Mitra kicked him in the leg. He was about to turn a victimized look at her when a strain of music drifted through the air. "It sounds like you were right about their bards." "There are a lot of them here," Mitra said. "I can hear dozens in different parts of this district. It's all mundane, though that's not surprising." One thing that people almost always underestimated about bards was their scouting ability, which included both their stealth and detection skills. As they made their way further into the district, he started picking up lyrics of several different songs, all of which were unfamiliar to him. "Are these songs well known here, Shawk?" he asked. "I don't know any songs, actually, Eep." "You poor thing." Mitra gathered Shawk up in a big hug. "Make sure you have bards in your reborn clan, okay?" His ears swiveled back and forth. He focused on listening to any histories, particularly those from 2 centuries ago or earlier. A leaden weight gradually formed in the pit of his stomach. All he could discern were more recent works extolling the feats and virtues of the resident clans. "Rolengork has always been alone," he repeated Rana Saja's words. "No heroes to save them, no legends to adore," Mitra said softly. "Born from the ashes of a people forlorn." "What are you saying?" Shawk sniffed. "Why am I crying?" "Mitra, stop making her cry." "But sad things are sad." Mitra released Shawk, who cleared her throat to fix her moaning voice. I don't understand. She sniffed again. Why do I feel so sad now? Was that magic? It was the song of your people, Mitra replied. Strands of the truth, forgotten with the passage of time. What do you know about the demon gods, Shork? Soraka asked. Not much. They came a long time ago and made a mess of everything. That's it? From what we've discerned, Soraka said, the demon gods came to Roland Gork 2 centuries ago. They made more than a mess of everything. They annihilated the civilization that was once here. That dam in your clan's territory is a vestige of that civilization. I can't speak for their culture, but it indicates that the people here were once far more technologically and magically advanced than they are now. That means we were strong, right? Shork asked. A lot stronger than we are right now? In all likelihood, yes, Soraka answered. It also means that the demon gods had to be powerful enough to destroy them. Something like that doesn't stop on its own. It has to be stopped. All right, so they were stopped. Then what? The point of Mitra's verse is that they weren't stopped here. All around us, you hear songs of relatively recent events, but no songs of that time 2 centuries ago. That means no heroes came to stand for Roland Gork, no legendary feats to pass on to future generations. Only loss. I don't know the reason why, but Roland Gork was abandoned to its fate by the rest of the region. It adds a previously unknown dimension to the words Roland Gork has always been alone. Shork's mouth dropped open in silent horror. You mean we had friends, and they abandoned us? That's terrible. My line of thinking assumes that this part of the world used to work like other parts of the world, Soraka said. We don't know what happened for sure. All we know is that there is no record of resistance against the demon gods, and no one came to help the survivors after the demon gods were dealt with. A low growl filled Shork's throat. Gah, that's vile. Once we get strong enough, we should just kill all of those bastards. They deserve what's coming to them. Soraka placed a hand on the young Osalo's head. The past is the past, he told her. Wise people learn from the past. One may remember it fondly. But those who cling to the past are some of the most tragic and pitiful people you'll ever know. Are you saying we should just forget? Forgive our neighbors for their betrayal? While we went from whatever built that dam to what we are now, everyone else. Again, we don't know what the exact circumstances were. Everyone in the region might have been ruined to the same degree. That didn't seem to convince the seething Osalo in the slightest. Maybe it was better to approach the subject again when she wasn't so angry. Hibiscus Glade turned out to be centered around the stump of another colossal tree. Well-to-do patrons adorned in tooled leather outfits socialized with acquaintances around the old routes or made their way up them to enter the establishment. Unlike the fighting pits, the interior wasn't hollowed out. The floor was instead purposely left at a high elevation to catch the most light from the gap in the canopy above. They left navigating the luxury market to Davy, who casually followed the flow of patrons around the floor. The drumming of bards competed with the merchants advertising their wares in what Soraka assumed the locals considered a refined setting. In reality, it wasn't much different from any other open-air bazaar that one might find in a trading town out in the world, so the way that the patrons carried themselves looked comically out of place. The atmosphere of the establishment wasn't of interest to him, however. His eyes carefully scanned the passing displays and he listened carefully to the claims of the merchants drumming up interest for their goods. Speckled blue salt, fresh from the tears of loot. Dear lady, this obsidian ornament would look wonderful on you. The variety of goods was the same as in a regular market, but everything was a step up from the ordinary. He supposed that was what a luxury market essentially was. There was tooled leather from the local craftsmen and expensive fabrics from beyond the Great Loot. The best quality fish from the lake and tumbled raw gemstones sifted from the muddy banks of Roland Gork's expansive river basin. No literature was in the offering, suggesting that illiteracy was high even in the upper class. Curios. Wondrous curios from Ranadratha's conquest of the West. The fantastic treasures of the Draconic Kingdom, at your command. Soraka craned his neck, trying to locate the source of the voice. We'll get there eventually, G. Davy tucked her arm inside of his. Just relax and go with the flow. He sighed and shuffled forward with the crowd. None of the other wares drew the slightest bit of interest now that he was made aware of his target. What's so special about loot from the Draconic Kingdom? Shork asked. It's just a human country, isn't it? Have you seen any items from the Draconic Kingdom before? No. They're losing to us, so they probably don't have anything good. It's like the guy said, right? Curios. Just pieces of junk that the people out there are trying to sell to us. Soraka felt more than a bit sorry for Ranadritha, who had to constantly drum up interest for his campaign. If he had been a warmaster in the Beastman Confederacy, investors of all kinds would be clamoring to support his venture. Maybe it should have been expected of the Insular Society of Rolengork. The crowd slowed to a crawl as they entered the exhibition set up by the merchants from the west. A series of frames containing painted landscapes filled the first booth. This looks so desolate, Shork scrutinized a sunset over the sea. They really don't have many trees, huh? I wonder how they live. That should be. Soraka's voice trailed off as he scanned the landscapes. They were all solely landscapes. There were no buildings or people portrayed within them. That's weird, he scratched his head. Humans usually have paintings of cities, daily life and such. I doubt those would sell here, Jiraka said. They moved on to the next booth. Karavaki was already there, closely examining the trinkets and pieces of art on display. Who would have guessed these guys had an appreciation for art? The Inquisitor looked up at a long wooden beam mounted above them. No, wait, that's a bed frame. What the hell? The market determines the value of an item, Davy said. In this case, it also determines what the item is. What do you see, Karavaki? I'm looking for religious iconography, family sigils, and official things like seals. There are plenty of these ones here, but I'm not sure what they are. Karavaki picked up a small purple badge. A merchant swooped in upon noting her interest. Dear lady, what you hold is the mark of a human warrior. They come straight from vanquished warbands. Soraka went to stand beside Karavaki, sifting through the pile of purple badges with a claw. If it was as the merchant claimed, the most common ones with a single spear are regular infantry. No, some of these single spears are different, magic casters, clerics. Crossed spears would be sergeants. 3 spears for an officer. 24 infantry badges per sergeant badge. 4 sergeants per officer, so a company is 100 men. It wasn't a warband at all. The structure suggested that the Draconic Kingdom's forces might have been composed of warbands in the past, but, now, the core elements of a professional army were represented in the chaotic pile of badges before him. Judging from the squad size, they mass-trained soldiers, and the rate of recruitment would mean that they had fewer sergeants to go around. His mind continued to work with the information presented at the booth, quickly coming up with a probable structure for the Draconic Kingdom's military based on humanoid tendencies and what he knew of the relationship between Rolengork and their human neighbors. He looked across the booth at the merchant, holding up 4 different badges. How much for each of these? He asked. They are all the same price, the merchant answered. I guess he doesn't know what they mean. Do you have anything from human lords? Oh, no, the merchant let out a laugh. Those who vanquish human lords keep their mementos. But we do have mercenary tokens. The merchant gestured to the display behind him. Dozens of different metal tags glittered in the sunlight. May I take a look? Of course, the merchant placed the display in front of him. The warriors from the front say that the humans bearing these tokens are stronger than the ones bearing the badges. Well, the badges are wood and cloth, while the tags are metal, so that makes sense, yes? Huh? Soraka brushed away the merchant's whimsical logic and picked up a tag hammered out of iron. Unfamiliar script was etched into the back. Mitra. Got it. The Sharon's lips moved in a whisper of a spell song. She took the chain from his hand, dangling the tag in front of herself. Julia Erad, Twilight Bounty, Oraculon, Cleric. Kennefest, Silver Blade, Eastwatch, Fighter. Aros, Catskinners, Eastwatch, Wizard. Catskinners? Mitra went through another half-dozen of the tags. Soraka addressed the merchant again. Are these the same way as the badges? Warriors on the front keep tags from strong humans? Yes, that's right, good lord. If I recall correctly, this metal is copper, that one is iron, and that one is silver. According to Ranadritha's men, they've obtained gold, platinum and mithril tokens, which they keep. His attention sharpened at the mention of the last. Copper was easy to refine and work with, as was iron. Silver, gold and platinum existed in native form, but not mithril. How many of these tokens do you have? We have quite a few in inventory. I suppose if you sew them into a leather jacket, they would provide good defensive value. Sure. My wife here just loves to bargain, so please negotiate with her. Davy. On top of the badges that I pick out, try to get as many of those tags as you reasonably can. He picked out 3 companies' worth of badges while Davy negotiated the sale of 500 tags. In the end, the merchant still had no idea what he had parted with, though he did recognize the material value of the different metals that the tags were fashioned out of. The next booth made him stop in his tracks. He stared quietly at the items on display. Hey, Jaraka. Does that look like 200 years to you? Hell no. Civilization did not go from sticks and stones to tempered steel in 200 years. All along the booth, rows of spears, swords and shields gleamed in the morning sun. A merchant unerringly moved in on him like a hunter fixated on her prey. Can I interest you in one of our fine trophies, good lord? Do you have any suits of armor in stock? Soraka asked. Enchanted ones, perhaps? I'm sorry, the merchant replied. Suits of armor from the west don't make it very far up the Rolengork. They are repurposed for use by the warriors there. I see. The weapons weren't suited for use by beastmen, so it made sense that they would eventually trickle into the capital as curiosities. Since metalworking was non-existent in Rolengork, the weapons couldn't be reforged into tools or anything else. He could only wonder how the warriors repurposed the mundane armor. He picked up one of the spears for closer examination. Several of his warriors leaned in to take a look with him. It's not enchanted, but it's as close to perfect as you can get for mass-produced spears. So that's a human fang. Soraka glanced down at Shulk. It's a spear. Eh? That's a spear? I thought spears were pointy sticks. Out of curiosity, where did you hear about this weapon? Stories from warriors that fight the border tribes. Or at least they claimed to. They always described them as long, sharpened sticks. He had experience with unsophisticated folk that lived far from the cities before, but he had never known someone living in a city so far from a country's borders that they were relatively unsophisticated. Do you have any enchanted weapons? He asked the merchant patiently waiting nearby. We very rarely get enchanted weapons, and those go to be sold in the Great Loot. That made sense. Magic items were worth more than their material or artistic value, after all. In the end, he purchased a few examples of each type of weapon on display. The merchant appeared pleased, so Soraka tried to get a bit more information out of her. Does anything other than curios make it upriver? Actual humans, perhaps? I'm beginning to doubt that humans ever will. The merchant shook her head. Everything else has been saturating the markets downriver and slowly making its way over, but the rare human is snapped up at the border. Given that they had not seen a single human in Rolengork from anywhere else so far, he was afraid to ask what they were snapped up for. They don't have any books at all here, Mitra grumbled. I bet they use them to start fires, Jaraka said. The Sharons looked turned sour. There were few better ways to anger bards than to destroy a source of lore. It was late afternoon by the time they finished their excursion to the Hibiscus Glade. Soraka watched the wealthy elite of the city go about their business on the way back to their inn. There was nothing particularly noteworthy about them, they were simply aristocrats of a primitive variety. We should advance our schedule, he said. This whole draconic kingdom thing doesn't line up. We should leave as soon as possible. Wait a minute, Shulk piped up. You were supposed to teach me stuff. I'd like for you to come with us, Shulk. Me? The Osala girl's eyes widened in shock. Leave the city? You won't be able to leave in a few years with how busy you'll be. It will do you some good to see a bit of the world before then. Plus you'll have a longer time to learn from us. Don't worry, we'll be heading back this way after we're done.